You never really know how far an entitled neighbor will go until they finally push you past your breaking point. And for me, that moment came the day Karen parked her car in the one place I considered sacred, my workshop. Now, this wasn't just a shed or some extra garage space. My workshop was my sanctuary, a place where I kept my tools, my welding gear, and the projects I'd been working on for years. Every corner of that place held a piece of my history scraps from my dad's old truck, half-finished metalwork I'd been teaching myself, even a bike I'd been restoring for my son. It wasn't just a room. It was mine, but Karen. She didn't care. She had this habit of acting like the neighborhood was hers, like every driveway, every sidewalk, every yard belonged to her simply because she lived there. The HOA only made it worse. They treated her like she was untouchable, letting her get away with things the rest of us would have been fined for instantly. It started small. She'd pull her SUV halfway into my driveway just for a minute while she unloaded groceries. Then she started parking there for hours at a time when her guests came over. I warned her. I told her she couldn't just keep blocking me in. It became a big deal. I came home from work, tired, covered in grease, just wanting to finish welding a project I'd been working. There it was, Karen's shiny SUV parked right in the middle of my workshop, not in front of it, not near it. Inside, she had actually lifted the rolling door open and parked her car inside my shop like she owned it. I swear, for a moment, I thought my heart was going to explode from the rage boiling in my chest. I slammed my truck door so hard the echo bounced down the street. Neighbors peeked through their blinds, probably knowing something was about to go down. I stormed across the yard, fists clenched, jaw tight, every step heavier than the last. The workshop door was wide open, her car sitting there like a throne in the middle of my space. And out of nowhere, Karen appeared, smiling that smug little smile she always wore when she knew she was about to ruin my day. "Don't look at me like that," she said, leaning against her car like it was some prize. I had friends over and needed the extra parking. Your workshop was empty. What's the harm? The harm was that she had violated the one boundary I had left. She had stepped into my sanctuary, invaded the one place I thought she would never dare to touch. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her keys and throw them into the street. But instead, I stood there, shaking, trying to keep myself under control. I just stared at her. And maybe that silence was what scared her, because for the first time, she shifted uncomfortably. My mind replaying the image of her SUV in my workshop over and over again. And by the time the sun came up, I knew one thing for certain. If Karen thought she could walk all over me, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life, because I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to get even, and my revenge would be something she would never forget. The morning after Karen parked her SUV in my workshop, I thought maybe she'd come to her senses. Maybe she'd move the car, apologize, and that would be the end of it. But no, Karen never backed down. I walked out to the yard, coffee in hand, only to find her car still sitting there, blocking my tools, my projects, my space. It was like a giant slap in the face, a reminder that she thought she owned me, owned my property. I clenched the mug so tight I thought it might crack. My workshop wasn't just locked up, it was hostage. When Karen finally came strolling over, sunglasses on, sipping her fancy latte, she didn't even look guilty. She acted like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Relax," she said, waving her hand at me like I was overreacting. "I'll move it later. Don't get so worked up. You men and your little garages." Little garages. That's what she called it. I felt the blood rush to my face. I'd built that workshop with my own hands. Every bolt, every weld, every shelf in there was mine. And here she was, treating it like her own personal parking garage. "Karen," I said, my voice low but firm, "you need to move your car." "Now?" She smirked. That same infuriating smirk she always had when she knew she was in control. "Or what do you think they call the HOA? You think they'll side with you over me? Please." And the worst part, she wasn't wrong. The HOA always covered. For her, no matter how many complaints I or the neighbors filed, nothing ever stuck. She was their golden child, the untouchable queen of the cull-d-sack. I stood there, watching her walk away, her heels clicking like nails in a coffin, and that's When the anger started to turn into something else, something sharper, cold, calculated, I knew yelling at her would do nothing. The HOA wouldn't help. The cops wouldn't care. So if I wanted this to end, I had to end it myself. For the next 2 days, I watched. Karen's routine was always the same. She'd come home late, slide her SUV right into my workshop like it was hers, and strut back to her house like she'd just won a prize. But what she didn't realize was that every time she did it, she was giving me the perfect opportunity, the perfect setup for payback. And as I sat in that dark kitchen on the third night, staring out the window at her car, sitting smugly in my workshop, the plan came to me. Simple, clean, poetic. She wanted to treat my workshop like her personal parking. Garage? Fine. I'd give her exactly that. But once her car went in, it wasn't coming out. Not until I decided, and the best part, I had a vacation planned that weekend. A whole week away. 7 long days where her precious SUV would be trapped, locked behind steel, and weld. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. For the first time in weeks, Karen had picked the wrong workshop, and by the time I was done, staring at Karen's SUV like it was some intruder that had taken over my home, the chrome gleamed under the hanging light bulb. Your little garage. But it was a big deal, and now it was time for me to prove it. I rolled up my sleeves, slipped on my welding gloves, and pulled out the gear I'd used 100 times before for projects. But this time, it wasn't for a bike, or a trailer, or a steel frame. This time, it was for something far more satisfying. The torch roared to life, blue flames licking the dark. Sparks danced across the floor as I started with the workshop door. The clang of metal against metal echoed in the night, each strike steady, deliberate, like a drumbeat of revenge. I reinforced the frame, sealed the edges, made sure not a single inch of that rolling door would budge. With every bead of molten metal, I felt the weight lifting off my chest. Weeks of frustration, humiliation, being walked on it all burned away in the fire. By the time I was done, sweat was dripping from my brow, my arms aching, but my heart was lighter than it had been in months. I stepped back, wiped the grime off my hands, and looked at my work. The door was sealed tight. It had never looked more beautiful. The next morning, I packed up for my vacation like nothing had happened. Bag in the truck, cooler. In the back, the sun was just peeking over the rooftops. When I glanced one last time at the workshop, it sat there quietly, innocently hiding the secret behind its welded steel. I almost laughed thinking about it. She could pull, she could scream all she wanted. That SUV wasn't going anywhere in me. I'd be miles away, sitting on a beach, sipping a cold drink, while she lost her mind trying to figure out what happened. As I pulled out of the driveway, neighbors waved, clueless. I just gave them a nod, my secret locked away with the sparks. And still, for the first time in weeks, I felt peace. Freedom, Karen thought she had one. She thought she could walk all over me, park wherever she wanted, and face no consequences, but by the time I returned from vacation, she would finally understand what it meant to cross me. She wanted to treat my workshop like her own. Fine, now she could keep it. I was hundreds of miles away when it happened. Feet in the sand, the sound of waves crashing, a cold drink in my hand. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about HOA meetings, Karen's nagging voice, or that cursed SUV sitting in my workshop. But back home, things were unraveling fast. Karen showed up that morning, same as always, sunglasses on, phone in hand, strutting across my driveway like she owned it. She walked straight to the workshop, probably humming to herself, already planning where else. She'd dump her car when I finally broke, but when she grabbed the handle of the rolling door and yanked nothing, she frowned, pulled harder. Still nothing. That's when she noticed it. The seams, the steel edges, sealed tight. The faint scorch marks from the welding torch daughter SUV was trapped. Witnesses said the scream she let out that morning could have shattered glass. A high, furious wail that had neighbors peeking through curtains and stepping onto porches. She tugged, kicked, pounded on the door, her face growing redder with every second. When that didn't work, she started yelling. Not just at the workshop, at anyone within earshot. Who did this? Who thinks they can trap my car? My car. Always hers, never mine. Neighbors watched as she stormed from house to house, demanding answers, waving her arms like a storm about to swallow the block. But no one said a word, not one. Maybe they were scared of her, or maybe for the first time they were enjoying the sight of her finally losing. By the second day, she was desperate. People saw her on the phone, shouting into the receiver, trying to get tow trucks out. But when they arrived, they couldn't do a thing. That door was sealed shut like Fort Knox. The SUV wasn't moving without cutting torches, and nobody wanted to touch it without permission. That's when the HOA got involved. A board member came by, clipboard in hand, trying to act like they were in control. But even they couldn't ignore the truth. Karen had been using my workshop without consent, breaking into my property, and now her car was stuck because of it. Whispers spread fast. The golden queen of the HOA had finally been humiliated. By the fourth day, Karen was unraveling. Neighbors saw her pacing in front of the workshop at dawn, hair messy, muttering to herself. She called the cops twice, maybe 3 times. Officers showed up, looked at the sealed door, and asked her one simple question. "Ma'am, why was your vehicle in someone else's locked workshop in the first place?" And she had no answer. For once, Karen's words failed her. While I was sitting under palm trees, letting the sun soak into my skin, she was melting down back home. Every day that passed, her anger turned into panic, her panic into desperation. The car wasn't just a car to hurt, was her pride, her symbol of control. And now it sat trapped, silent, behind my workshop door, mocking her every time she walked past. By the time my vacation ended, Karen was on the edge of collapse. Neighbors were buzzing with stories, laughter, disbelief. The untouchable Karen had finally been touched, and she had no idea that I was about to come back and finish what I started. When I finally pulled into the neighborhood after my vacation, I could feel the tension before I even parked my truck. Curtains shifted, neighbors stepped out onto their lawns, eyes following me like I was carrying a secret. They had all been waiting to see unfold. And there she was, Karen standing in front of my workshop like a guard dog that had been starved for days. Her blonde hair was frazzled, her sunglasses nowhere in sight, her eyes red and tired. For the first time since I'd known her, she didn't look powerful. She looked desperate. The moment she saw me, she stormed forward, her voice cracking with rage. "You think this is funny? Do you know what you've done to me?" I stepped out of my truck slowly, calm, almost casual. I let the silence hang there, let the neighbors gather closer, waiting for what was about to happen. Then I said the words I'd been holding in for weeks. "No, Karen. Do you know what you've done?" Her jaw dropped, but before she could spit out another excuse, I walked right past her toward the welded door. My gloves were still in my toolbox, and as I pulled them on, the sound of the metal snapping into place echoed through the crowd. The torch roared to life once again, sparks flying as I began cutting through the welds I'd sealed days earlier. Karen flinched with every spark, her voice sputtering between outrage and pleading. "You had no right. That's my car. You can't do this to me. I'll have you arrested. I'll sue you." But the neighbors didn't buy it anymore. They had seen her lies. They had seen her melt down, and now they were watching justice unfold. Finally, with a loud clang, the metal gave way. The workshop door creaked open, and there it was, her SUV, dusty, silent, a prisoner finally set free. I stepped back, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and said, "There, take your car, Karen, and don't ever set foot in my workshop again." For a moment, the entire street was silent. Then the whispers started. Laughter, applause. Someone even muttered, "About time." Karen's face turned crimson. She fumbled for her keys, jumped into the SUV, and slammed the door shut so hard the glass rattled. The engine roared to life, but as she backed out, her eyes darted to the crowd, her kingdom of fear. Now, laughing at her downfall, she sped off without another word, her tires screeching against the pavement. And just like that, Karen's reign was over. The HOA never defended her after that. How could they? Everyone had seen her exposed. The golden queen of the neighborhood had been stripped of her crown, her power reduced to nothing more than an empty threat. As I sat in my workshop again, free, quiet, I looked around at the shelves, the tools, the projects, waiting for my hands. And I smiled because this place was mine again, not hers. not the HOAs. Mine, Karen thought she could park her car in my workshop and walk away with no consequences. She thought her power, her arrogance, her entitlement would shield her forever. But, in the end, she trapped herself and me. I finally got my peace back. Sometimes revenge doesn't need words. Sometimes it just needs steel, sparks, and patience. And sometimes it's worth the wait. And that's how it all went down. But now, I want to hear from you. What's your opinion? Did Karen finally get the taste of her own medicine? Or do you think I went too far welding her car in my workshop? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I love hearing your stories and perspectives too. And hey, if you enjoyed this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss the next unbelievable tale of entitled neighbors, wild HOAs, and the kind of justice that only real life can deliver. This channel is growing because of you, and every comment, every like, every subscription helps keep these stories alive. So share your opinion, subscribe, and stay tuned. The next story might just be even crazier than this one.